Hello, my name's Lindsay Cunningham and welcome back to my millinery workshop. Today I'm going to show you how to cover a skull cap. Here's our skull cap that we're going to be using. This is a custom one that I did for someone. It's basically my style 113, but I've rounded the sideburns and I rounded this back edge. It has a keyhole in the back. First thing we're going to do is we're going to take a piece of elastic and we're going to span it across the back. You don't have to use this width elastic. You can use any width you want. I've used as thick as 2 inches, but it does give you something to sew your cap cover. Now what I'm doing today is going to be one of the fastest, easiest ways to do it, and in a later tutorial I will show you more complicated ways and more elaborate, more theatrical ways. But for now, this is going to be one of the easiest ways, and the first thing I'm going to do is put the elastic on and then I'll be back. Hi, I'm back. I have my elastic sewn on. Now I did it by machine. You can do it by hand. Sometimes I do it by hand. Just depends on the thickness of the skull cap, or if I have trouble getting that under the machine, or the type of elastic that I'm using. But most of the time I do it by machine. Now the next thing I'm going to do is sew together the cover for the cap. It's 3 pieces. We have a center piece, and then we're going to have 2 side pieces. They get pinned together, and then I'm going to serge them on my serger, which is set up to serge and sew at the same time. If you don't have a serger or you can't set it up to sew, just sew it on the sewing machine, and I will be back as soon as that's done. Okay, I have my top all put together. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to put it over the cap. Now, one of the secrets of doing this is you have to pull it tight. You don't want any ripples, you don't want any pulls, you don't want any weird looking anything, and also your seam allowance, make sure that your seam allowance is going the same way on both sides, and that you have centered your seams so that they're even on both sides. Okay, I now have it pulled on my cap. I just have it pinned, but you can see I've centered my seams. I have my seam allowance, both sides going to the outside. I have it pulled tight. I have it pinned to my elastic. You want it to be able to stretch so you can get it on and off. And the next thing I'm going to do is trim off some of this excess fabric, but I'm not going to cut a whole lot off because I want to have something to hold on to and work with. And I'll be back when that's done. Okay, I have trimmed off some of my fabric, but you see I haven't trimmed off too much. I've got enough that I can still work with it. Now, what I've started doing is I have sewn the fabric down to the elastic, and I have also started hand sewing this through. Now, I'm doing it where I do have little dimples in the fabric, but I try to make them as small as possible. But this is the quickest method, even though you do have the little dimples. Now, I have seen people do this on the sewing machine. I don't like to do that. It's hard for me to do that on my machine, but you also have that top stitch line that shows more than the dimples do. And that's okay if you're putting a trim over it or covering it with something where you won't see it. But one tip for sewing this, I do this by hand, is get a good thimble. I just recently found this thimble. It's very heavy. It's a large thimble, like a man-sized thimble. It's very thick, and it has a ridge on the edge that you can see that keeps the needle from slipping out, and it's so thick that it'd take you forever to make a hole in that. I have had some regular thimbles that I have pushed needles through them, sewing on buckram or plastic that I use. So I'm going to sew on this some more, and then I'll be back. Okay, I finished sewing the cap on. I trimmed down the seam allowance to be small, but don't trim it too close to your stitching or it could pull through. Now, some people just leave it like this. If you want, you could glue in a little binding around the edge to finish that off, or you could sew binding, or you could put in a full lining and stitch it to the inside of your cap. And that's all you have to do to cover your cap. Stay tuned for another tutorial on how to cover a skull cap. There are several different ways, and we will tackle another way on my next installment. Thank you.